My best friend slept with my wife. My family found out and took his side. So I disappeared. And the way I did it left all of them scrambling for years. This is the story of the two people I trusted most in this world. How they burned everything down while I was still inside the house. And how I made sure they understood what it actually means to lose someone who was done playing nice. My name isn't important for the purposes of this story. But I'll tell you I'm 32. I work in project management for a construction firm in Calgary, and up until about 2 years ago, I genuinely believed I had built a good life. Stable job, nice apartment in Beltline, a wife I adored, and a best friend I'd known since we were both 11 years old. I thought I was one of the lucky ones. Turns out I was just the last one to find out I wasn't. My best friend. I'll call him my best friend, because that's what he was, or what I thought he was. For 21 years, grew up 2 houses down from me in Red Deer. We played hockey together, survived high school together, drove out to Banff together the summer after graduation, just because we could. He was the kind of guy who could walk into any room and leave, with 3 new friends and someone's phone number. Loud, magnetic, impossible to stay mad at. I was the quieter one, the planner, the guy who showed up on time and remembered your coffee order, and meant it when he said he'd be there. We were opposites in the way that sometimes works. For 2 decades, it worked. My wife and I met at a work event in 2019. She was a graphic designer hired by a firm that was partnering with ours on a downtown development project. We ended up next to each other at the welcome reception, both clearly out of our depth at whatever the event actually was, and we spent the whole night quietly making fun of the canopies. I asked for her number before I left. She gave it to me. That was it, that was the whole thing. We got serious fast. She moved into my place 8 months later. By 2021, we were married at a small ceremony at a vineyard in the Okanagan. 30 people, picnic tables, fairy lights, her grandmother crying the whole way through. It was exactly what we both wanted. My best friend was my best man. He gave a speech that made the whole room laugh and then cry. He hugged me after and said I'd done good. I thought he meant it. What I didn't notice, or refused to notice, was how the dynamic shifted after the wedding. My best friend started coming around more. He and my wife had always gotten along fine. But sometime in that first year of marriage, it went from fine to something else. He'd text her directly to confirm plans, instead of going through me. She'd laugh at things he said, in a way that was slightly different from how she laughed at other people's jokes. He'd stop by when I was working late, and they'd watch something on Netflix, and it would already be over by the time I got home. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself this was my best friend and my wife, not some strangers. And that the trust I'd built with both of them meant something. I told myself I was catastrophizing, because I'd been stressed at work and not sleeping enough. I was wrong on all of it. The thing that broke it open wasn't dramatic. No gut punch discovery scene straight out of a movie. It was a Tuesday in March, and I came home early because a site visit got canceled. I wasn't trying to catch anyone. I wasn't suspicious in any active way. I just wanted to eat something and sit down and not think about load calculations for a few hours. My wife's car was in the lot. I figured she was working from home. I went upstairs. The bedroom door was half open. I pushed it the rest of the way. She was on the bed. My best friend was sitting on the edge of it, shirt untucked, leaning toward her. They both heard the door and turned at the same time. The look on their faces. That specific combination of guilt and terror and the desperate animal need to find an explanation told me everything before either of them said a word. Nobody spoke for what felt like a full minute. Then my best friend said, "Hey man, this isn't." I held up my hand. "Don't." He stopped. I looked at my wife. She opened her mouth. I shook my head once. I turned around, walked back downstairs, picked up my keys from the kitchen counter and left. I drove to the west side and sat in a Tim Hortons parking lot for 3 hours. Not crying, not calling anyone. Just sitting there while my brain slowly accepted that the two people I trusted most had been in our bedroom in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, and the look on their faces was not the look of people who'd been caught doing something heinous. I went back to the apartment at 10 that night. He was gone. She was on the couch, still dressed, waiting. She started talking before I was through the door. She was sorry. It hadn't been going on long. She hadn't meant for it to happen. She loved me. It didn't mean anything. I listened to all of it. I didn't say anything until she was done. Then I asked her to leave. She said she didn't have anywhere to go. I told her that wasn't my problem anymore. She packed 2 bags that night and went to her sister's. I changed the deadbolt the next morning. My best friend texted me that night. One message: "I'm so sorry. I need to explain. Please call me." I didn't respond. I haven't spoken to him since. The thing about losing 2 people at once is that you don't have the emotional infrastructure for it. Your brain keeps reaching for the phone to call your best friend about what just happened, and then you remember your best friend is what just happened. You want to talk to your wife, but your wife is the other half of the disaster. The loneliness is structural. It's like the floor dropped out. I spent the first week at my place, kept going to work, said nothing to anyone. My manager noticed I was quieter than usual. I told him I was dealing with some personal stuff and he nodded and left me alone. That was all I needed. My family found out about a week and a half in. Not from me, my best friend called my parents. I still don't fully understand the logic there. My best working theory is that he wanted to get ahead of the story before I could frame it. He told my mom that something had happened between him and my wife, that it had been a terrible mistake and that he was devastated and needed the family to know that he was taking responsibility. My mom called me that evening. She sounded shaken. She said she'd heard from him, that she couldn't believe it, that what he'd done was inexcusable. She asked if I was okay. I said I wasn't, but I was managing. She said to come for dinner that weekend. She'd make whatever I wanted, just come. I should have clocked that she said what he did instead of what they did. I didn't catch it in the moment. The dinner happened. I showed up at my parents' house in Red Deer, sat down at the kitchen table, and told them the full version. My mom cried. My dad did that thing where he stares at the table and doesn't speak for a while. My younger sister sat beside me and kept saying, "I'm so sorry," in that voice people use when they don't know what else to say. It felt like support. I leaned into it. That was my mistake. 2 weeks after that dinner, my mom called again. Her voice had changed. Still warm but careful. Measured in a way that meant she'd been rehearsing. She said my best friend had come to see her. He'd driven down from Calgary to talk. He was broken up about it. He'd brought flowers, apparently, and spent 2 hours explaining how it had happened. How he'd been struggling, how he and my wife had built something without meaning to. And he'd been trying to end it for weeks before I walked in. He was taking full responsibility. He wanted me to know that, I said. He drove 3 hours to talk to my parents. She said he wanted them to understand. I said he wanted them on his side. She went quiet for a second, and then said she didn't think it was quite that simple. She said he was clearly suffering. She said she wasn't making excuses for what he did, but he had been part of our family since we were children. 21 years. She didn't think I should throw that away over something that could be worked through. I said, "Mom, he slept with my wife. In our bed, while I was at work." She said, "I know. I'm not saying what he did was right." But then she said he'd asked if the four of us could sit down together. Him, me, my parents. Just to talk. I told her no. She asked me to think about it. I said there was nothing to think about. She said he was family. That word, family. Like he earned it retroactively just by being around long enough. My dad took a different approach. Less emotional, more pragmatic, which was worse in its own way. He called me a few days later and said, "Look, I know you're angry. And you have every right to be. But this man has been your brother in everything but name for 20 years. You don't throw that out without at least having a conversation." I said, "He wasn't my brother. Brothers don't do what he did." My dad said, "People make mistakes." I cannot express what it feels like to hear those 3 words after something like this. People make mistakes, like he tripped, like he miscalculated something, like there was any version of this that was accidental. I told my dad that what happened wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern of decisions made over an extended period of time, probably months, in the home I paid for and the relationship I'd built, with 2 people who knew exactly what they were doing. Calling that a mistake was an insult to the word. He sighed. That long tired sigh that parents use when they've decided you're being unreasonable. And want you to know it without saying so directly. He said maybe some time would help. That once the dust settled I'd see things differently. I hung up. My sister tried. She called a few times. Said the right things. Asked how I was sleeping and whether I was eating. But I could hear the hesitation under it. The same careful tone that told me she was managing multiple relationships and trying not to tip any of them over. She mentioned once that my best friend had reached out to her too, that he seemed genuinely remorseful, and that she wasn't taking his side. But she thought genuine remorse deserved at least some acknowledgement. I said if he were genuinely remorseful, he wouldn't be campaigning to the people who love me. He'd leave me alone. She didn't have a response to that. I stopped taking calls from my parents. Replied to texts with a minimum. Stopped going to family dinners. I wasn't dramatic about it. No announcements, no confrontations. I just quietly withdrew and let the distance build. In the meantime, the divorce moved forward. My wife and I had a straightforward split on paper. No kids, apartment was in my name. She had more personal assets than I did. We used a mediator. It was civil in the way that things are civil, when both people know the other person has a right to be angry, and neither wants to make it worse. She moved in with her sister long term, and then, into her own place in Kensington by the fall. She texted me once during the process, not about logistics. She said she was sorry, that there was no excuse, and that she hoped I could move forward. I read it and put my phone down and didn't answer. I've never answered. By September I'd been promoted at work. A regional coordinator position that had been open for months, and that I'd apparently been the front runner for since the spring. More responsibility, better salary, and most relevantly, the option to be based out of our Vancouver office instead of Calgary. My manager asked if I'd consider relocating. He said it wasn't required, but the team there was short-staffed, and I was the strongest fit they had for on-site leadership. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I didn't tell my family I was moving. I didn't tell them I was considering it, applying for it, accepting it, or preparing for it. I packed my apartment over 3 weeks, sold or donated what I didn't want, loaded what remained into a pod, and on a Thursday in October, I handed my keys to my building manager and flew to Vancouver. I didn't give my parents a new address. I didn't give my sister my new phone number, which I'd quietly changed the month before. I didn't post anything on social media. I left Calgary like a door closing quietly in an empty house. The Vancouver office was good. New team, new projects, city I'd always liked but never properly lived in. I found a place in East Van, second floor of a house, decent landlord, 15 minutes by bike to the office. I ran the seawall on weekends. I cooked actual meals again. I slept without waking up at 3 in the morning with my chest tight. For the first time in almost a year I felt like myself. And then, because these things always happen, the family found me. It was 4 months after I'd moved. My mom called from a number I didn't recognize, a landline at someone's house I assumed, and I picked up without thinking. Her voice had that sound, the one I recognized from childhood, when she was about to say something she knew I didn't want to hear, but had convinced herself was for my own good. She said my best friend and my ex-wife were together now. Officially. They'd been seeing each other openly since November. I said, okay. She said they were talking about moving in together. I said, that's their business. She said she wanted me to know because she didn't want me to hear it from someone else. I said, how did you find this number? She paused, then said she called my office, told them she was my mother and it was a family matter. Someone had given her the main line and she'd worked from there. I asked her to please not contact my workplace again. She said she'd been trying to reach me for months, that she was worried, that what I was doing, disappearing, cutting everyone off, wasn't healthy and wasn't fair. I said, what's not fair is that my best friend and my wife betrayed me in my own home, and when I needed my family to have my back, they spent their energy on him instead of me. That's what happened. I'm not disappearing. I'm protecting myself from people who have repeatedly shown me that their comfort matters more than my pain. She started crying. I let her. Then I said, don't call this number again. Don't call my office. If there's a genuine emergency, text me on the old number and I'll see it eventually. Otherwise I need you to respect that I've made a decision. She said, you're throwing away your whole family over one mistake. I said, it wasn't a mistake. And I'm not throwing anyone away. I'm just done being the one who absorbs everyone else's choices and asks for nothing in return. She didn't have anything to say to that. I hung up and sat with the silence for a few minutes. Then I went for a run. The next contact came from my dad, 3 weeks later, via email to my personal account. Straightforward, and shortened that way. He had, when he was angry, but trying to seem reasonable. He said he understood I was hurting, but that the way I was handling this was causing serious damage to the family. My mom wasn't sleeping. My sister felt caught in the middle. He said he thought I owed it to all of us to have a real conversation. I replied with 2 sentences. I've had all the conversations I'm willing to have on this topic. Please don't contact me again about this. He replied asking if I was really willing to let it end like this. I didn't respond. My sister's attempt was more creative. She followed me on Instagram from a new account. Just her name, no photo, a handful of neutral posts. And sent a DM saying she missed me and could we please just talk, not about any of it, just talk. I sat on it for a day. Then I blocked the account and made my profile private. I want to be clear that blocking my sister was the hardest thing I did in this whole process. She wasn't the one who betrayed me. She was just someone who loved both me and a situation that couldn't be loved from both sides at once. And she'd chosen the wrong side without quite realizing she'd chosen it all. I don't think she's a bad person. I think she was caught and I think she handled it the way most people handle impossible positions, which is to say badly. But I also needed her to understand that what she'd done, the careful neutrality, the subtle defenses, the he seems genuinely remorseful, had consequences. That choosing not to fully choose is still a choice. That I'd needed something specific from her, and she'd given me something else. The account I didn't expect was from my best friend himself. He found my email address. I still don't know how, and sent me a message in January. Long, careful, clearly written and rewritten several times. He said he'd been in therapy. He said he understood now, more fully, what he'd done and what it had cost me. He said he wasn't asking for forgiveness, and he wasn't expecting reconciliation. He just needed me to know that he was sorry, genuinely, in a way that had nothing to do with wanting anything back from me. He said my friendship was the longest and most important relationship of his life outside his family. He said he thought about calling me probably every week. He said he hoped I was okay. It was a good letter. Better than I expected. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to my spam folder and didn't respond. Not because the letter wasn't genuine, it might have been. But because his sincerity wasn't actually the point. The point was that he'd made a set of choices. Repeatedly over what turned out to be almost 8 months. And those choices had torn apart two of the most important relationships in my life. A well-written email a year later didn't undo that. It just meant he'd learned how to talk about it. That's not the same as it not having happened. The thing that I think people fundamentally misunderstand about situations like mine is that forgiveness gets framed as something you do for yourself. Let go of the grudge, release the bitterness, move forward, and I understand the logic. Carrying resentment genuinely does cost you something. But the people who push hardest for that forgiveness is always the people who would benefit from it being extended. My parents would benefit from having me back at the table, as if nothing had happened. My best friend would benefit from absolution. Even my sister would benefit from not having to sit with the discomfort of what her fence sitting had cost. I'm the only one in this equation whose life got no simpler if I forgave anyone. I moved forward anyway, not because I forgave anyone, just because I am, genuinely, a person who enjoys his life, and at some point, I decided that enjoying it mattered more than processing their guilt on their behalf. By spring, I'd settled into Vancouver in a way that felt real. I joined a recreational hockey league, Tuesday nights at an arena in Burnaby, and made a few actual friends through that, people who knew me as I was now, and had no interest in the version of me that had existed before. I started seeing someone casually in the summer. A landscape architect who worked near my building and who laughed at the same things I did. It wasn't serious, but it was good. It reminded me that not every relationship was a liability. And then the visit happened. It was a Saturday in August. I came back from morning hockey, and there was a car in the street in front of my building that I recognized. Red Honda Pilot with a dent in the rear quarter panel. My dad had been meaning to fix for 3 years. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at it for a few seconds. Then I looked up and my parents were on the front steps of my building. My mom saw me first. She stood up quickly, the way people do when they're anxious and have been waiting a long time. My dad stood up slower. He looked older than I remembered. They both did. Behind them, a step down, was my sister. And behind her, and this is the part I still don't quite believe, standing beside their car in my driveway with his hands in his pockets, was my best friend. I want to be clear about what I felt in that moment. Not anger exactly, something colder. Something that came from very deep and was very, very clear. I walked up to the group. I said, "You need to leave." My mom said, "Tyler," then caught herself and said my name instead. "We drove 9 hours. Please just give us an hour." I said, "You drove 9 hours to show up at my home, without any communication and bring the person who destroyed my marriage. That's not dedication. That's a choice I need you to live with, not me." My best friend started walking toward me. I held up one hand and he stopped. I said, "Don't, I've been clear about this." He said, "I know. I needed you to see that I'm sorry. In person. I needed you to see my face." I said, "I've seen your face. Now I need you to leave." My mom said she just wanted her family back. That she missed me every single day. That she hadn't slept right in a year and a half. That she'd do anything. I said, "The time for doing anything was when I needed my family to stand behind me. And you called me unreasonable for not forgiving him." "My dad's son," I said, "don't." He stopped. I looked at all four of them. My mom with her eyes already wet. My dad with that defeated expression I'd only seen on him a handful of times in my life. My sister with her arms crossed, like she was cold, though it wasn't cold. My best friend with his hands still in his pockets and his jaw tight. And his eyes doing something I couldn't quite name. I pulled out my phone. I recorded the moment, not for drama. Just because I'd learned from this year and a half that having evidence of things mattered when the other people in the room had a habit of remembering events differently. I said, "I want all of you to hear this one time, clearly, and then I need you to go. I am not coming back to this version of the family. I am not reconciling with him. I am not interested in apologies or explanations or anyone suffering that they brought on themselves. I have built a life here that I am proud of, and that has nothing to do with any of you, and I intend to keep building it. If you contact my workplace again, I will file a formal complaint. If you show up at my home again, I will file for a restraining order. I have the video of this visit and I have documentation of the phone calls and the emails, and I will use them. I love you, Mom. I love you, Dad. I love you." I looked at my sister when I said that last one. "But love doesn't mean I owe you access to me. You made your choices when it mattered. I'm making mine now." My mom was crying. My dad looked like someone had taken the air out of him. My sister uncrossed her arms and covered her mouth with one hand. My best friend just looked at me. He didn't say anything. I don't know what was on his face. Something complicated and earned. "Ice, please leave now." They did. Slowly, the way people do when they're hoping you'll change your mind. My best friend went first. Got in his car without looking back. My parents held each other in the driveway for a moment. My sister got in the back seat without saying anything. I watched the red Pilot drive to the end of the street and turn. Then I went inside, made coffee, and sat in my kitchen for a long time. That was 14 months ago. I filed for the restraining order the following week. I had the video, I had the documentation. The process was straightforward. Nobody from that version of my life has contacted me since it went through. My sister sent one email before it was finalized, just her address and a single line. "I'm sorry I wasn't better when you needed me to be." I read it a few times. I didn't respond. But I didn't delete it either. Some days I wonder if I'll feel differently in 5 years. Maybe. People change. I've changed. But I've also learned that there's a difference between being open to change and holding space for people who've shown you their priorities under pressure. Under pressure, mine were clear. Under pressure, theirs were. 2. I'm not angry anymore. That part surprised me. How quickly the anger left once I stopped being accessible to the people who kept reigniting it. What's left is something quieter. Not peace exactly, but something adjacent to it. The feeling of having made a decision I can live with, built on values I actually have, rather than obligations I've just always assumed I held. The hockey team won the division championship in March. I have a standing Sunday dinner with 2 colleagues who have become something close to friends. I took a solo trip to Japan in April, and spent 2 weeks doing nothing anyone expected of me. I came back and my apartment felt like mine in a way that I hadn't experienced a home feeling in years. That's not nothing. That's actually everything.